The door swung into a dark room lit by fake candles on the wall. They were large and exaggerated, the kind you would see in a cartoon castle. It took me a moment before I realized I was standing in the library I had seen moments ago on the monitors. I looked to where the camera would be but saw nothing. It must be very well hidden, I thought. Across the room I saw a set of double doors that led back into the main hall of the playhouse. I stepped forward to make my own way over, then stopped. Being brash would get me nowhere. If I wandered around this place without a plan, I would get myself caught, and then there would be no one rescuing the others. Instead, I turned and shut the door, holding it and making sure that it didn't entirely close all the way. There had to be some way to open it from the inside. It was clear that this place was meant to mimic a studio, which meant there had to be some way for the actors to not only get in, but back out as well. Looking at the now shut door from my side, it looked like part of the bookshelf. The books that rested on it were all made of felt and had no actual pages in them. They simply sat on the shelf for display alone. I skimmed the surface, looking for some sort of hidden knob or lever, but found nothing. I began pulling on the books as well, but they were all bolted in place except for one, a blue book with 2 golden squiggles for trim along its side. I gripped the top lip of the thing and pulled, and to my surprise, it slid out about an inch from its spot before stopping. I held my breath, then pushed the shelf completely shut. If this wasn't actually the latch to open it, then there was a good chance I was stuck in here. I pulled the book once again and heard a slight click. The shelf swung back open into the recording room. Thank God, I muttered. Just then I heard a familiar laugh coming from the door behind me. I whipped my head to see the clock on the wall with its eyes open, smiling. Not wasting a second, I spun around, slipped through the crack, then slammed the door shut. Stepping back behind the monitors, I watched from the screen as 2 birds entered the room. They bounced around the space, searching for their trespasser, checking every corner eagerly as if it were some sort of game to them. My heart pounded as one passed the shelf. I kept one eye on the door and the other on the monitor, prepared to bolt it if needed. To my relief, however, the birds skipped on by without a second thought. They didn't know about the secret passage. Before they left, they stopped just before the exit. One of the things reeled its head back and opened its wide beak. Its stomach started throbbing as it bobbed its neck up and down. From its mouth I started to see a wooden stick appear. When it was out far enough, the bird wrapped its hand around it and yanked the slimy pole out. It raised the post over its head and whacked the clock viciously. Through the wall I could hear it scream horribly. The fact that it was so human sent a chill down my spine. After that I watched in disgust as the bird painfully shoved the stick back into its gullet. Once they had gone, I sat staring at the screen, trying my best to formulate a plan. It was clear that entering the playhouse for more than a few minutes would result in me getting caught one way or another. There was really nowhere to hide once I was in. I could always drop in from one of the open ceilings and try to get my friends out of the library door, That way I didn't risk having to travel the same path twice. However, finding the right window would be hard. It seemed that once you were in the birds' company, you were always under their supervision. I glanced back at Bear, Ethan, and Dan in their cage, then to Larry on the floor. Shoot, Larry. I had almost forgotten about him amidst my frantic thoughts. He was another problem I would have to account for. If the other creatures didn't kill my friends, then he certainly would. I highly doubted that he had forgiven us for what had happened back at the house all that time ago. How had he even survived for so long down here? He seemed to be healthy despite his rough appearance, well fed and somehow bathed. The idea that he had been living with these creatures seemed ludicrous. However, it also seemed like the only possible explanation. If that were the case, that eased some stress off my shoulders. That meant I had more time to plan, to observe. Not a lot more, but at least some. I looked down at the control panel before me. It was filled with various sliders and dials that I really had no clue the purpose of. There were a few exceptions, however. For each monitor, it appeared that there was a button that corresponded to it in the panel. Clicking it would cause it to light up. From there, I learned a few things. While that room was active, the sound from it could be heard. When I turned on the nap room's audio, it was utterly silent except for the horrible breathing from the puppets and the sounds of the birds' footsteps. I flickered through the other rooms, testing them as well. However, there was really no point due to them being empty. That was at least until I got to the nursery. I clicked the button and was greeted with a horrible, raspy breath. It was breathing so stressed that the voice of whatever it came from could be heard gasping out with it. As the awful noise filled the booth, it was joined a few seconds later by the sound of a larger shifting mass in the darkness. And not long after that, a sick and disturbing squelching noise. I clicked it off after that. Whatever it was, I didn't need to know. The other thing I learned about the buttons on the panels was more critical. There was a set of joysticks on the board, and when I was tuned in to a specific monitor, I could control the camera with it. One stick pivoted while the other panned the shot. But the strange thing was that the cameras seemed to defy physics. They weren't mounted at a specific point. They could be moved freely about the room. They would halt if I got too close to a wall or if I tried to pass them through one of the creatures. But other than that, I could really take them anywhere. Immediately I set to work, going from room to room and exploring every inch of it. If I was going to stage a jailbreak, it was vital that I know my way around. After toying with the camera for a couple of hours, I eventually ended it in the nook, with the shot angled on my friends. I felt oddly creepy watching them as they had finally passed into sleep, but it was just comforting to know they were okay. "I'll get you out of there," I said softly. I panned the camera over to Bear's face and looked at her. A pang of strong emotion radiated in my chest. "I promise." After that, I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. If Larry had survived this long, I assumed that my companions would be safe as well. I would wait until they were up and observe how an entire day unfolded. Once I had an idea of what I was up against, I could devise a plan from there. But for now, I needed rest. The adrenaline from the day had drained and the energy that I had stored away in my body. The sound of the monitor would wake me up if anything happened. It was difficult to calm myself, given the circumstances, but eventually I managed to sleep for a while.
Alright, everyone. I'm going to try again.
Benjamin yelled from the dining room. We all filled in from our various spots around the house to witness his next attempt. This had become a routine over the past months. Each run, when Ben got more equipment and had tinkered with it to perfection, he would summon us into the room to see if the radio he was building would finally come to life. He had already prepared us for the only outcome to be static, but we didn't care. The excitement of the moment he finally got it to work was interesting enough. Even Larry always came to watch.
Alright, Ben.
Jan announced when we had all gathered.
Show us what you got. With pleasure,
The old man said with a grin on his face. The radio was a mangled mess of circuitry, old alarm clock pieces, and computer parts. It looked a rattle away from bursting into flames. He flicked the dial on the machine, and to our surprise, static hissed from the speakers. Ben laughed in triumph as we all ogled and applauded.
Nice work, old man.
Daniel said, placing a hand on his shoulder.
Benjamin McDormand, the house famous inventor.
Claire joked with delight.
Well, can you change the frequency?
Andy asked with a smile.
Maybe there's something on.
Ben raised his hands to calm everyone and put his hand on the dial, turning it through the frequencies.
Alright, we can try it, although don't get your hopes up. It's pretty unlikely that...
Before he could even finish the sentence, the faint melody of music could be heard through the static. The tune was muffled and distant and sounded like an old classical song, but the prospect of a frequency in a place like this was incredible. Ben looked at us with a shocked yet incredibly pleased face as another wave of cheers filled the room.
Well, keep going. Maybe there's more.
Jan urged.
Alright.
Ben continued to turn through the dial until we heard another sound emanating from the radio. We hushed one another as we listened in, but it wasn't music this time. It was the sound of a dozen small clicking sounds. I would have just thought it was the audio acting up and popping with static, but after a moment, Grace spoke.
What is that?
I think... Mark started. I think it's Morse code.
Yeah, you're right,
Benjamin confirmed.
Do either of you know it? Yes, I do,
Ben added.
Someone grab me some paper.
Bear ran into the bedroom and came back with a notebook and pen. Ben then continued.
There was a break a moment ago. I think it's looping.
He leaned against the wall, began writing down the letters as they were sent through the transmission. We all looked on in suspense, wondering what the strange message in this strange land would say.
This is better than TV,
Mark joked. His smirk faded as he saw Ben's face, however. Ben, what's the matter?
I don't think I translated this right. Hold on.
What does it say? Benjamin didn't answer. He just began recording the letters as the transmission looped once again. Larry piped up from the back.
Come on, old man. Just tell us already. Who gives a damn if it's right or not?
Ben finished and looked down at the paper with pursed lips.
Ben,
Jan calmly asked.
what's the matter?
He once again didn't answer, just turned the notebook to us so we could read the message. T H E E X I T I S B E L O W Y O U. The exit is below you. We all looked on, confused.
Are you messing with us?
Daniel asked with an uneasy smile. Ben shook his head. We all knew he wasn't the joking type, at least not about something like this.
What does it mean?
Jan asked. Grace licked her lips.
I think it means exactly what it says. Okay, but why is it playing through Ben's makeshift radio?
Who knows with this place? Mark said. Whoever knows.
Do you think that...
Ethan started.
Do you think that's actually true?
We all fell silent.
Well, if it is then, I mean, we didn't go too far down there.
Daniel eventually spoke.
We can't even if we wanted to. That thing wouldn't let us.
Claire pointed out.
There's no way,
Jan said.
I mean, think about it. This place wants us dead. It has to be a trap. Heck, even the bodies outside try to lure us out there at night. It's just trying to bait us downstairs so that the creature can get us.
But what if it's not?
Daniel spoke.
What if it's telling us how to escape? If that's the case, we can't just sit up here.
We've never been down there since the creature showed up, though.
Bear nodded.
We have no clue what's waiting for us.
Suddenly, Larry started giggling. It started off small, but slowly grew into wild laughter.
What's so funny?
Dan snapped.
Oh, nothing.
Larry sighed as he composed himself.
Just all of this bullshit. Of course the damn house isn't lying to us. It's messing with us. It knows we don't stand a chance of getting out of here alive, and it's rubbing it in.
Mark stepped forward and calmly held up his hand. Larry, calm down.
Calm down? No, I have been calm. I was calm when we woke up here, and I was calm when that blonde chick collapsed on the hill. I was calm when we learned about that thing downstairs, and I was calm when the body we left outside got up and started dancing around. I've been calm for the last 2.5 years.
Larry screamed, throwing up his hands.
But this is the last straw with me.
He slammed his way past Mark and over to the radio that sat on the floor. In one swift motion, he raised his foot and brought his heel down hard on the thing. It exploded into 1,000,000 pieces. All of Benjamin's hard work over the last year gone in seconds.
No!
Ben yelled as everyone let out similar gasps and cries. Daniel grabbed Larry and slammed him against the wall.
Larry, what the hell are you doing? Get a grip.
He began to hysterically laugh once again.
What are you going to do, Dan? Scream at me? Beat me till I'm black and blue? The outcome is all the same. In the end, we're all going to die. and there is nothing we can do about any of it.
Dan released his grip as Larry continued laughing.
That's what I thought. Do you know why? 'Cause you're all too afraid to do anything. You're just so content to sit around and jerk off with each other.
In an instant, Larry was out cold on the floor. Dan's knuckles were split open. We all stared, shocked. Daniel was a big man, and when he needed to be, he could be intense. But we had never seen him do something like that. He looked down at his hand, then back to all of us. I'm sorry. I just wanted him to shut up. None of us had any arguments with that. Larry was still breathing and would be fine when he woke up. If not, maybe with a headache and pissed off. Mark and Frank dragged him off to the bedroom after checking he was alright, while Ben crawled around on the floor, collecting the scattered remains of his creation. Daniel walked off to the sunroom to stare out the windows. He was never quite the same after that moment. He was more distant, less happy. I turned to Bear, Andy, and Ethan.
Holy crap!
Bear muttered. Yeah, I replied. That was pretty intense.
He kinda deserved it.
Kinda. Ethan chuckled. He deserved a lot more than that. We looked down to Benjamin, clutching the remains of the radio on the floor. Andy knelt next to him.
You alright, Ben?
He had tears welling in his eyes. It may have just been a bunch of old parts, but that radio had been something that had brought him so much joy and excitement. Both things we were in short supply of. I could only imagine how he felt.
Yeah, I'm alright.
Maybe you can fix it or rebuild a new one with the parts you still have. If you manage to get that pile of scraps to function, then I don't think anything can stop you.
Benjamin smiled softly.
I appreciate the kind words, kids, but it's quite alright. I'll be fine. It's just disheartening at all.
Stupid Larry.
Andy scoffed as she held up a piece of smashed circuit board. As we all filled out and dispersed around the house, I could tell that nobody wanted to talk. We were all not even sure what to say to one another. Despite the scene we just had witnessed with Larry, we had also just learned a disturbing fact. There might be an escape from this place in the part of the house where we dare not go. My thoughts tangled themselves as they relentlessly switched back and forth on the matter. If there was an exit, could we reach it? Maybe Jan was right, it could be a trap, but if it wasn't, then we had to go. We couldn't stay here forever. I grew tired of talking with myself and moved to join the one person I knew I could always speak with. What are you thinking, pretty lady? I asked as I slid down the wall next to Andy. She currently had her chin resting on her knees with her arms wrapped around her mouth, deep in thought. After a moment, she lifted her head and spoke.
Do you think the radio was right?
That there's an exit. I'm not sure. I've been back and forth on it. How about you? She bit her cheek.
Larry may be a jerk, but I think he was right. I do think Ed's down there.
What makes you certain?
I'm not sure. Just a feeling, I guess. But if you think about it, it sort of makes sense. If the house really wanted to trap us here and mess with us, it would keep the only way out as far away as possible, then guard it with its worst creature.
I nodded and looked at the floor. At the time, I didn't want to admit it, but I agreed with her, mainly because I felt the same feeling that she did. So, what now then?
I'm not sure. I doubt anyone will actually believe it. Half of the house already seemed apprehensive the second after we read the page.
That's true. I can't really see them wanting to go down there based on a single phrase. Andy suddenly buried her face into her knees.
I can't, Joel. I don't think I can stay here much longer. This place is so suffocating. I'm so happy I'm here with you guys, but I don't want this life for us,
She said, lifting her head again and looking into my eyes.
If there's even a chance that there's a way out, then we have to go. Or at least I have to.
I stared at her and swallowed. She looked so similar to her. The same dark hair and blue eyes, the faint freckles across her cheeks, even the expression Andy wore at the moment matched her face the night she... I shook the thought from my mind and focused on Andy. She was lost and tired, and meant every word she was saying. Whether it was me agreeing with her or blind passion, what I said next came out naturally. What if we go?
What?
She said, taken aback. What if just you and I go? We can go down and see if it's even there. That way, nobody else risks getting hurt, and we get to find out the truth. If it's there, then we can come back for everyone else.
You think we could do that?
Sure. I mean, when Daniel, Larry, and No Name went down there, they were walking around for a while before that thing showed up. That means there has to be a way to avoid it. If we sneak out at night, we can be back by morning. That way we don't have to deal with anyone trying to stop us. Andy thought for a while, then turned to me and smiled.
Okay. That's not a bad idea. When do we go?
Well, we have all the time in the world, so let's not rush into anything. We need to make sure we know exactly what we're doing when we get down there. Maybe I can pester Daniel to describe the basement for us, so we have a straight shot to the stairs that he mentioned.
Okay.
She nodded.
You're really willing to do this, huh?
Yeah, of course, I said, wrapping my arm around her. This isn't the life I wanted for you guys either, especially you. You deserve better, Andy. Andy pierced through me with her mesmerizing eyes, and my heart pounded fast in my chest. Being so close to her always made me feel so alive. Every other moment was nothing in comparison. She leaned in close and softly touched her lips to mine. An electric shock ran through my spine. Wow, I said. What's that for? She smirked.
Because I really like you, Joel.
I looked at her for a moment before leaning in and kissing her back, more certain this time. I really like you too. I often look back at that moment and kick myself. I had been so naive. I had no idea how deep the house really went, and I had no idea what else could be down there. When Andy had left and didn't come back within a few days, I had just assumed the worst. But the part that haunted me the most was that it had all been my fault. I had put the idea in her head to go, and I had waited around until it was too late. If I hadn't kissed her that day, maybe things would have turned out differently. Perhaps I wouldn't have felt so strongly about her. Perhaps I wouldn't have changed my mind about the whole idea. I was so afraid that I would lose her if we went down there. I tried to change her mind, but I couldn't. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore, and she knew she had to go alone. I had become one of the people who would have tried to stop her from leaving. I didn't blame her for having to go, but I certainly blame myself for not following after her. The sound of overly cartoonish laughter jolted me awake. I instinctively looked at the screen to see the lights of the nap room had come on, and the clock on the wall was hysterically laughing. All of the puppets on the ground hopped up and began frantically shaking and dancing in place. I began to grow anxious as I watched one of the birds approach the cage. Within, Daniel hopped up and stepped between the creature and Ethan and Bear. He didn't look like he was about to fight it, but he certainly looked as if he was ready to protect it at all costs. To my surprise, and probably his as well, the bird didn't move towards him. It simply gestured for them to exit the cage.
Come on,
I heard Daniel mumble to Bear and Ethan through the monitor's audio.
I think we'll be okay.
Cautiously, the three of them stepped out of the cell, eyeing the bird as they passed. It stared down at them, and though I was watching from behind a screen, I could feel the anxiety they felt from where I was sitting. They exited the cage into the sea of puppets that all peered at them as they danced and jumped around. The three of them looked in pure fear. I prayed that they would be alright and that nothing terrible was going to happen. As I continued watching, I noticed Daniel staring off to the back of the room. There stood Larry, standing on his mat with a sinister smirk and staring right on back. From behind, the bird that had led Bear, Dan, and Ethan out gave them a nudge forward into the crowd. The puppets squealed and hollered in high-pitched voices, pointing at the newcomers. As they did, I noticed a set of tiny small teeth poking through their fabric mouths for the first time. Sharp, pointed teeth. At the head of the room by the door, a bird entered and clapped its hands. The room fell hush as if an announcement was about to be made, all except for one puppet near Bear that continued to squeal and hop. All of the other creatures and birds in the room locked eyes onto the thing, but it didn't stop its roaming about. However, once the tension in the room became palpable even through the screen, it appeared to notice. It stopped and began to cower in place. A sense of dread began to build inside me as I prepared for whatever would come next. Nothing could have prepared me, however. All of the birds in the room exchanging a glance, held up 3 fingers, nodded, then pointed to the puppets. All at once, every other furry creature in the room pounced and rushed towards it, all except for my friends and Larry. They just watched in horror as the puppets tore the other one to shreds. Purple fur ripped and teared through the air, but instead of cotton or stuffing, flesh and blood splattered beneath. The creature screamed in pain for a few moments before it was silenced with a gargle and devoured alive. Larry watched from his mat, and his grin had now turned into a full smile. Dan looked to him, and Larry raised his eyebrows with glee. My stomach churned. I needed to get them out as soon as possible. When the puppets dispersed, all that remained was a mess of blood and fur. One of the birds walked over and lay down in the spot and began to roll around, using itself as a makeshift mop. It then hopped up and ruffled its feathers, and the whole scene resumed like it had moments before. The bird by the door clapped its hands, and the puppets looked over. The bird beckoned for them to follow, and like a herd of cattle, they all obeyed, Larry included. Bear, Ethan, and Daniel took the hint. From that point on, time became hazy. I didn't move from the screen and watched every second of my friend's imprisonment, looking for any short window for rescue. I had assumed that since Larry had seemingly been here so long, there had to have been some sort of routine to how the playhouse functioned. If I could figure that routine out, I could find the best time to slip in and get my friends. I thought I could learn it all in one day, but 3 days later, I still sat in that dusty old computer chair, staring at the flickering screen. The routine was always the same each day. That part wasn't the problem. Everyone and everything would wake up and go to the kitchen where they all would eat the blandest looking cereal, despite the puppets already consuming at least one of their brethren each morning. After that, they would go to the activity room for a few hours, then get a bathroom break that consisted of a mile-long line for the single toilet. As far as I could tell, the puppets never actually did anything when it was their turn. They just sat there, dancing their heads back and forth while hopping off. I only ever saw the tub get used if any of the puppets had gotten covered in blood. From the bathroom, it was on to the playroom where I watched the horrifying little gremlins sprint around the play structure like rabid animals, as the birds watched from the edges of the room. They would call out different puppets that seemingly broke some sort of rule. I noticed when this happened, they would hold up a number on their fingers. Once that number reached 3, that puppet became a meal for its friends. 3 strikes and you're out. Got it. I figured that since Larry seemed far more intelligent than the puppets, this was how he managed to survive for so long. He knew how not to break the rules. Unfortunately, my friends didn't know said rules yet. That became determined very quickly. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After the playhouse, they would go to the library for a story. This would have been the perfect time to rescue my friends, but a bird always took a spot right in front of the secret bookshelf. I would be caught the second I opened it. After that, it was back to the activity room, then the playhouse one last time before a dinner of standard-looking sandwiches from the seemingly endless fridge, and then bed. As I said, the routine wasn't the problem. By the 3rd day, I learned that it didn't really change, and the exceptions were minor if it did. The problem was that the birds were just too observant. Any single step out of line and the birds caught it, adding to the tally. If any of the puppets snuck off, the birds would manage to see them with alarming speed and cram them into the timeout corner of the nap room. A strike would also be added against them. Some particularly egregious strikes, like one of the puppets biting the birds, would result in them being torn in half on the spot. I was thankful that Daniel's punch must have been weak to the thing, or he might have suffered the same fate. It appeared that no matter what way I snuck in, I simply didn't have the power or agility to rescue my friends. None of the circumstances seemed to allow me a window that I could slip past the birds. That's why 1 day had turned into 3, 3 to 5, and 5 to a whole week. Back during the first day when my friends had their first experience in the playroom, they stood in the far corner of the room, trying desperately to avoid the barrage of colorful demons running around them. I moved the camera close to listen in.
What do we do?
Bear softly questioned.
I'm not sure. It looks like as long as we listen to them and stay out of the way, we'll be fine.
Daniel summarized. Do you think Joel is okay? Ethan asked. My stomach dropped at the question. I should have been there with them.
I hope so,
Bear muttered. The two suddenly noticed Daniel glaring across the room, his target being a grinning Larry.
I can't believe it. How is that bastard still alive?
Oh God, he's coming over here. What do we say?
Nothing. Let me handle it.
Larry smugly crossed the room through the frenzy of furry bodies and stopped before my friends, never once letting that smile leave his face.
Well, I'll be,
he started. His tone was excited and unstable.
If it isn't my old roommates.
Though he had looked well kept when I first saw him, Larry looked awful on second inspection. His hair was long and his frame was hunched and twisted. He had bags under his eyelids, and his eyes themselves were detached and twitchy. The man had clearly let himself go to the chaos around him. As he spoke, Daniel said nothing.
Ah, come now. Is that any way to treat an old friend? What are you doing down here?
Daniel snapped. Larry scoffed.
What am I doing down here? I'd think you of all people would know exactly why I'm down here, Daniel. I should be asking you the same question. Although I am sure the answer is already clear.
Larry's smirk returned.
You finally came to find the exit, huh?
Daniel said nothing.
And you dragged the kiddos along as well, I see.
He turned to Bear and waved.
Hello, sweetheart.
My grip tightened on the controls. Bear made a face of disgust and Ethan stepped in front of her. Larry laughed.
Calm down, kid. I'm just messing around. Besides, not like standing up for her will win you any affection. She always preferred the other one. Joel, I think.
Ethan's eyes darted to the floor.
Speaking of which, nobody else decided to join your little crusade, huh? Still cozy up there in the same old rooms.
Daniel finally snapped.
Look, just shut up. I don't give a damn about anything you have to say. Just stay out of our way, and I won't bust your face in. You know I can, Larry.
I could see a hint of fear in Larry's expression, but he swallowed it down and smiled as if he knew something Dan didn't.
Oh, I know you can. Why don't you, tough guy? Go ahead. Take your best shot.
I saw Daniel clench his fist and tighten his jaw. I could tell he was seriously contemplating it.
Dan, don't.
I softly muttered to myself. Luckily, my unheard wish came true. Daniel took a deep breath and relaxed his muscles instead. He just glared at the man with a look that could kill.
Well, that's a shame,
Larry said plainly.
Perhaps some motivation.
He took a step towards Bear and Ethan and Daniel didn't hesitate. He grabbed Larry's shoulder, turned him towards himself, and decked him in the face as hard as possible. Harder than he had punched the bird the morning prior, and that blow had even been adrenaline-filled. Larry staggered backwards, falling on his butt, then curled into a ball as he held his nose.
Dan, no!
Bear cried. Instantly the room hushed as a nearby bird pointed to Dan. I erupted up from the chair and turned my body to the library door, waiting for the verdicts. The bird held up 2 fingers, and I released a shaky breath. They must have counted Daniel's first attack against the bird. Not good. But at least he wasn't dead yet. I slowly sat back down. The playhouse resumed its chaos as a bird came over and scooped Larry up, then carried him to the corner of the room to a bench. As it did, Larry looked over its shoulder with a wicked smile. The man was clearly out for revenge, and by the looks of it, was still completely insane as well. Not a good combo.
Daniel, what were you thinking?
Bear chastised in an unsteady tone.
You can't do stuff like that. You saw what happened this morning.
Daniel looked intensely at the floor and bit his cheek. I wasn't gonna let him get near you kids. Besides, it was worth it.
You dying isn't worth anything done.
Ethan told him.
From now on, you stay away from him. Let us do any talking. You don't need any more attention on you.
Daniel didn't say anything, but I could tell he acknowledged the demand. I buried my head into my hands in relief and leaned forward onto the panel. As I did, I noticed a board of glowing lights below me. Some were switched on, some were off. I flicked one, and suddenly the light in the kitchen came to life. I tried another next to it, and the room turned brighter. I then looked to a handful that had already been switched near the edge of the board. I turned them off, and I noticed a few lights in the playroom go out. A couple of puppets froze and looked up alongside the birds and my friends. They were spotlight controls. That gave me an idea. Well. Hello everyone, Grimm here, and thank you for making it to the end of today's video. I would like to take a moment and thank everyone who has joined me on live, be it through YouTube or TikTok, while I have been recording this. I thought it was a fun little exercise, and I may try it for the next few. After I finish this, what I will be doing is editing my videos, and those who wish to stay and chat with me while I do that are welcome to do so. But outside of that, this story is part 8 out of Somewhere Beneath Us, written by our amazingly talented friend of the channel, Ink Welder. I'm not going to drag this one out too long. So those who have made it to the end, the secret word is feet, because I forgot to put on my socks. Feet. As always, be safe wherever you are. Have an amazing night or day, and I am Grimm, and I'm, well, signing off.